get caught. I'm gonna get caught. No, go down, go down. Go down, door. No. What does this mean? Well, that door's just broken. Do I think the game is glitching? Yes, I do. Yes, I do think the game is glitching. I do think the game is glitching because that door doesn't work anymore. The day I'm posting this video, August 8th, 2024, is the 10-year anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's, and they're dropping a new game, Into the Pit, which is based on the Fazbear Frights books as part of that 10-year celebration lineup. So I figure, what better day than today to wrap up the Silver Eyes trilogy by breaking down the fourth closet. I'm about to ride that sweet, sweet wave. Oh, I'm surfing on that SEO. And that's called marketing, babes. That's what that's called. It's called marketing. Anyway, take one last look into these eyes, because it's the last you'll be seeing them. I'm on a time crunch. I'm speaking with a ridiculous amount of confidence for someone who's filming on August 7th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these sunglasses on, because the less takes I have to do, the less time I have to edit. And so sunglasses on. I was also going to try and wear a little top hat in honor of Freddy Fazbear, but unfortunately, I think I threw my top hat away. Woo! It's been almost 9 months since I posted the first video about the Silver Eyes, nearly long enough for a human baby to gestate, but the only thing that's going into labor is my mind, as I struggle to remember the finer details of this book. Now, I read the trilogy in June, July of 2023, and I wrote the scripts for the Silver Eyes and the Twisted Ones not too long after. But it was a lot to get through, and I was running out of time, so I said, Summer, shoot and edit the first video and then hop on the script for the third book. And I did technically do that. I just did it 9 calendar months later in July of this year. So there's that. I wrote myself a lot of notes, and I double-checked the order of the plot against some synopses posted online. Shout out to the FNAF wiki, because I ran out of time to reread the book. But I do have a copy of it that I got from the library, so I was able to sort of skim through and get some details that I knew I was fuzzy on, and I might pull from it at different sections in this book. Anyway, with all that said, let's get into it. Okay, so the story picks up 6 months after the end of the second book, and just to make sure that jumping off point makes sense, here's a quick refresher of what happened at the end of The Twisted Ones. You'll recall that the final showdown took place in a weird alternate Freddy's that looked as if it had been newly constructed, but also never used. So it was covered in dust, but also covered in plastic sheets. And it had blue walls instead of red, Balloon Boy, a bunch of animal animatronics on the top of the arcade games, and it featured a fake waterfall. And I want to clarify that it is a weird and alternate location, but it is not the sister location, because the sister location is one of the main settings in this book. Curtains for Charlie, or so it seemed, until a perfectly healthy, utterly unspring-locked Charlie strolled up to the diner where her friends were actively mourning her, as if her body had not just been horribly mangled, and only John, the boy who loved her, who actually told her he loved her right before she done got scooped. Only John is like, that's not Charlie. Now, for the past 2 books, we've followed Charlie almost exclusively. She's the main character of this trilogy, and we've only briefly cut away to different POVs. But we take a departure from form in this book, with the story switching more between John, Jessica, and Carlton than Charlie until the midpoint or end of the book. So, like I said, we pick up 6 months after the events of the second book. And our sweet little Johnny boy, oh, he's struggling. He's struggling to sleep because of the nightmares, he's struggling to focus when he's awake, and he's struggling at work due to the lack of sleep and the lack of focus. And because he works in construction, that's a pretty dangerous thing to do. So his boss gives him an ultimatum. Get it together, pal, or get lost. If he shows up late or loses focus on site one more time, he's out of a job. And all this time that he's been struggling, he's refused to speak to Charlie. This Charlie that he knows isn't really Charlie. All of his friends are like, dude, you need to talk to her. You need to figure out what's going on. You need to give her a chance because you're hurting her feelings and you're ruining our friendships. And whatever this holdup is, it's time to move on. And this is advice which John has steadfastly refused. The night of the ultimatum, John decides to take a little nighttime stroll. He wants to get out of his sad little apartment where he's been sitting on his sad little bed being sad, get some fresh air, get his head in order, do some thinking. And that's when Jessica finds him. Jessica, she was driving. She roomed with Charlie during the events of the sequel. They were college roommates, and she was also one of their childhood friends from the first book. She pulls over when she sees John. I forgot to put my blinker on. Hey, hi, John. And she invites him to a party the following day. Carlton, their other friend, the son of the chief of police, and also the best friend of Michael, the final child to go missing of the original missing children, and the spirit that haunts Golden Freddy. This is all book one stuff. You get it. And if you don't get it, you can by stopping here and watching those. And while you're at it, feel free to like and subscribe. What a treat. What a delight. I got my call to action out of the way. Anyway, marketing, baby. Carlton has come home from a visit from school, and Chief Burke is having a party. It's going to be a fun little get-together made up of those few residents of Hurricane, Utah who are haunted by unique horrors they alone can comprehend. And yes, Charlie's going to be there. Jessica invites John, who does not want to go anywhere that charlatan wearing Charlie's face will be, but because he's a nice, polite young man, he says maybe. And when he gets to work the next day a few minutes late and is promptly fired, that maybe becomes a yes. When he gets there, everybody's happy to see him because he's been a little bit of a recluse, and he, does his best to convince everyone he's okay, especially when Chief Burke pulls him aside to specifically check and is like, hey, buddy, I need some help with this ketchup. What's going on? And he's like, I'm fine. I'm actually going to go now. Thank you. So he's like, that's all I can handle, and he dips, only to run into the one person he wants to see least right in front of him on the lawn. Charlie. And here's the thing about Charlie. Despite everybody's protest to the contrary, she has changed. When the beat-up, broken, weirdly fleshy Freddy Fazbear scooped her up and spring-locked her, she'd been a youthful, round-faced teenager, a little out of step with her peers and a little bit unsure of herself. And then, suddenly, after a traumatic and deadly accident, she shows up to the diner with no wounds, and she's different. Her face is a little bit older, more mature. She holds herself with more confidence. She dresses differently. It's like she grew up, became a woman in the snap of a spring lock. Everyone else is just so happy Charlie's alive that they're willing to look past these changes and look past this strange undercurrent of fear, this overwhelming sense of wrongness that overtakes them anytime she's near. Since they love Charlie, they push aside their terror and convince themselves that whatever they think they see is just something they're imagining. John is the only one who refuses to comply. So when John finally finds himself face to face with Charlie at this party, to everyone's relief except his, he's more convinced than ever that this is not the Charlie he fell in love with. He's being so weird to her that she actually says it. She asks him if he truly doesn't believe she's who she says he is. She asks him if he truly doesn't believe she's who she says she is. I wrote he. Whoops. And when he doesn't respond, she starts crying, telling him that it's okay, she understands, and really just being sympathetic. Sympathetic girl. We feel bad for her, don't we? We all do. She starts crying and telling him it's okay. And this kind of shakes John up. He realizes that maybe it isn't so strange that she looks more mature. Maybe they've all grown up. You have to after experience something like they did. And if he's been having nightmares, what kind has she been having? But when he looks at her with this newfound sympathy and understanding, looks into her actual eyes, he can see that they aren't Charlie's eyes. And when he asks her what he said to her, right before she got grabbed by that Freddy Fazbear, she can't remember. She doesn't remember that he told her he loved her the night he thought she died. And of course, she's like, oh, the trauma. I was stuck inside a metal bear. That makes you forget things. We just gotta say, he's like, oh man, that's a pretty big important thing that she forgot. And we just put a little pin in that for right now. But that softening that he feels towards her in that moment is enough that when Charlie asks if he'll meet her for dinner so they can talk, he agrees. Now let me go to the page because I wanted to talk about this. Hold on. This is a crispy book. It's a crispy book. Okay. Here. It says, John, would you meet me tomorrow? She asked steadily. Why? He said before he could stop himself, but she did not react. I just want to talk. Give me a chance? Her voice rose shakily, and he nodded. Sure. Yeah, I'll meet you tomorrow. He paused. That same place okay? He added carefully, waiting to see how she would reply. The Italian place? Our first date? She said easily and gave a gentle smile. Her tears seemed to have stopped. Around 6? John let out a deep breath. Yeah. Okay. I scared my cat with that one. Now, I find this dinner invite to be interesting because, and this is either an intentional detail to show Charlie's missing memories, or it was just a little writing mix-up. I'm choosing to believe that it's intentional because it tracks with the rest of the story. But by that same place, John is referring to the restaurant where they had their first date. Charlie says that they had their date at an Italian place, but in the twisted ones, John and Charlie went to get Thai food. So there's that. Now, I actually can't remember for certain if they had Thai or Italian for their actual date. I'm pretty sure that I remember it being Thai food. And when I Googled it to see if anybody else noticed this, I did find a single blog. It's called Millie Bot Reads, and she said something about Charlie saying Thai food was very expensive. So there we go. I think I'm not crazy. It was Thai food. So I'm choosing to believe that this is just a subtle, incorrect answer that only eagle-eyed fans will notice and be like, whoa, something's going on there. They had Thai food, but nobody else mentions it, not even John, so maybe it was just a little bit of something, or maybe I'm remembering it wrong. We'll just see, shall we? Okay. Anyway, cut to Jessica. Interior, apartment, day. She's just getting home from the grocery store. She's just getting home from the grocery store. She now lives alone, no longer on campus, and no longer rooming with Charlie, though Charlie was invited to be her roommate, and Jessica still has, all of Charlie's old dorm stuff from their shared room. So Jessica walks in, armful of groceries, and she gets this deeply unsettled feeling, like she's being watched, or maybe someone's inside with her. Everything's silent, and she thinks she's imagining this weird feeling until Charlie pops out of nowhere from deeper in the apartment. And remember how I said that everyone has this intrinsic fear of Charlie that they keep pushing aside? This is one of those times. The person looks like Charlie. The person talks like Charlie. And if the law of ducks is taken into equation, we must assume that it is Charlie, mustn't we? So when Jessica gets the explanation that Charlie had just popped over because she wanted help picking out what to wear for her date with John, Jessica buys it. John makes his way to the restaurant, and on the way, he notices that the old movie theater where he and Charlie saw Zombies vs. Zombies on their first date has been turned into a clown-themed restaurant called Circus Baby's Pizza World. And yes, it is that Circus Baby's Pizza World, the sister location, and we will be circling back. So John and Charlie meet at the Italian restaurant that should be a Thai restaurant, but no one aside from me and one other random blogger seems to recall this. But of course, if I'm wrong, tell me. I would rather know. I would rather know the right information than spread the wrong. But in my memories and what I think I wrote down in my notes and in my heart of hearts, I believe it to be Thai. They finally have a proper conversation. She's early to the date, which is unlike her. The Charlie he knew had a habit of showing up late, covered in dirt and perhaps blood, because she kept getting tangled in strange crimes and discovering dead bodies right before they were supposed to meet. And this earliness, along with the other weirdness, cements even further that this is not Charlie. John even proposes to her face that she might be her own twin, Sammy, but Charlie shuts that down with a simple, Sammy is dead. Okay, they end on a strange note, of course, with Charlie asking John if he has heard from her Aunt Jen. John hasn't, of course, it's not his aunt, but Charlie does tell him that Aunt Jen is the one who saved her from the Twisted Freddy that night, which tracks because John, while he was screaming and crying and getting dragged away from the corpse of his beloved, thought he saw Charlie's Aunt Jen in the basement. The two of them part ways, but instead of going home, John opts to circle back to Chief Burke's house, needing an outside perspective. John shares his suspicions concerning Charlie, and the chief, who takes it all in, is like, you know what? That tracks. I tried to get Charlie out here to take a look at this doll that I saved from our old house, and it's the Ella doll who carried the little tea tray and wheeled around on the track from book 1, and she refused. And then he says there's other weird stuff going on, like a bunch of weirdos walking around dressed as clowns because that new clown restaurant, Circus Baby's Pizza World, is having a deal where if you dress as a clown, you get to eat for free. So people are just walking the streets dressed as clowns. And even worse than that, children have started to go missing again. And so Chief Burke is like, let's look into this. Go team on 3. 1, 2, 3, go team! And quick side note, this book came out in 2018. Sister Location came out in October of 2016, and in August of 2016, there was around 8 million clowns roaming the United States for no reason whatsoever other than to wreak havoc and distress amongst the general public. Now, I've always been of the opinion that the clown sightings started as a marketing ploy gone awry. It Chapter 1 came out in September of 2017, after all. Maybe the clowns were there to drum up anticipation in a publicity stunt gone awry when 1 million weirdos joined in and it got out of hand. Then again, maybe that timing doesn't work out. Strange to launch a marketing campaign a year before the movie's release. The public has a short memory. Maybe a whole bunch of people just got the urge to festoon their bodies in red rubber noses and oversized shoes and buy out all the white face paint at Hot Topic on a summer whim. A hot August breeze. Who can say? Not you, not me, only the clowns know. But want to know what I will say with a high degree of confidence? Almost as high a degree of confidence as me saying that I'm going to post this on tomorrow, August 8th, when I'm filming this on August 7th? I bet that Scott Cawthon and Kira Breed Wisely were partially inspired by the clown sightings when writing this book, because it fits timing-wise. This came out in 2018. One must assume that with writing and edits, it was being written around 2016, and then the news is overrun with clown sightings, and they also have a clown-themed game, and they're like, oh my gosh, bingo, bango, bongo, oingo, boingo, let's do this. Clown sightings. I can't say for sure, because I'm not Scott Cawthon and I'm not Kira Breed Wisely. But what I will say is that I bet that's what happened. Anyway, as John makes his way to his car from Chief Burke's house, he sees one of the clowns that Chief Burke mentioned. It looks like a woman in costume at first, beautiful and elegant, and just far enough away that John thinks if he steps into the shadows, she won't see him, because there's something off about this clown girl, a strange seam down the middle of her face, something robotic in her movements. She locks eyes with him for a moment, then moves on, casually strolling down the sidewalk, moving down the street toward Chief Burke's house. And then John returns to his sad little apartment to sit on his sad little bed and feel sad again and stare at Theodore's head. Now you remember Theodore, the little purple robotic rabbit that Charlie's dad Henry made for her, the robotic rabbit that Charlie dismantled to make her weird smooth-faced robot heads that she was training to listen and speak to each other back in the Twisted Ones? Well, John has Theodore's head as the last tie to the woman he loved, and recently it started making strange mechanical whirring noises. This noise has been getting a little louder and a little more staticky every time he's heard it, but that night it starts speaking. That's weird, and it's definitely not what it normally does, and he can't make it out at first, but eventually he's able to decipher that it's repeating 2 phrases. Shooting star, silver reef. Taking into consideration the events of the last 2 books and the subsequent uptick in haunted animatronics, this newly vocal robot rabbit head warrants looking into, so he grabs Theodore's head and turns right back around to go to Clay's house, only to find that Clay has been brutally attacked by the clown girl, by the way. John doesn't know that, but we do, and is hanging on to life by only a thread. And on the ground next to Clay, still abandoned, is Ella, that little doll from Charlie's house. John calls 911, Chief Burke is taken to the hospital, and later, when visitors are allowed, John and Jessica go to check on the chief. He's wounded, but stable, and he gives John and Jessica an envelope containing some pictures of Charlie and a microfilm, and he tells them, enigmatically, they must have a maximum range. That's my Chief Burke voice, but he's in his hospital bed. Boop, 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 and he's like, take this envelope. They gotta have a range.
She doesn't have the range. I'm sorry, Charlie. I love her to bits, but she doesn't have the range.
Just to make sure you can actually hear what he enigmatically stated, he said they have to have a maximum range. That will come back, but none of our characters know what it means just yet. And now, it is only after the attack, after the envelope full of pictures, and after Charlie herself shows up in the hospital room with Marla, refuses to look at Chief Burke, and almost seems disappointed to hear that he's stable, that people finally seem willing to listen to John and their own better instincts and realize that something is going on with Charlie. John tells Jessica about Theodore's decapitated head's whispered message, Shining Star Silver Reef, and Jessica says she might know what it means. There's a Silver Reef, Utah, an old ghost town not too far away from where they are now. Also, I only realized this now, part of the story is set in St. George, Utah, which is the bigger city where Charlie and Jessica went to school. Like the Thai Italian fusion restaurant and the movie theater turned Circus Baby's Pizza World are in St. George, but I went on Google Maps and it's only 28 minutes away from Hurricane, so it's still in the same area. Still in that same neighborhood. When John and Jessica get to the ghost town, they find a house with an old metal shooting star, either hanging above it or hung on it somewhere. Anyway, ghost town called Silver Reef, shooting star somewhere in the house. It seems the most logical place to start for shooting star Silver Reef. And in this random house in the middle of a literal Old West ghost town, they find Charlie's Aunt Jen. She's living there, because that's a thing people do. That's why they're called ghost towns, because people still live there. That's wrong. It's the opposite. They're called ghost towns because nobody lives there. Not even really ghosts. They're just empty. Now you may be asking, Summer, how did Theodore's decapitated robot cranium know to lead them here? He's not a haunted animatronic. He's just a toy rabbit. Well, I'll tell you. It's never explained. It's just something that happens, and here we all are. It's also one of the first big questions that struck me when I finished the trilogy, and I was like, wait a second, what happened there? Nobody really says what happened. And if there is an explanation for it that I've missed, then please let me know in the comments. Like I said, I'd rather know. I'd rather know the truth. I'd rather there be real information than fake information. And I'm doing my best. Oh, please. I've read the book, but it's been so long, and I'm skimming through, and I'm filming as fast as I can. So if you know, you can tell me. You can tell me. I won't be mad. Anyway, as far as I know, they just never clarify. So, like I said, Aunt Jen is there. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but that's actually another thing that really confused me, because at the end of the Twisted Ones, they mentioned John seeing someone who looks like Aunt Jen kneeling next to the mangled Freddy that Charlie was trapped inside, but this little detail is thrown in as John is actively being dragged away from the crumbling wreckage by Chief Burke as the storm-ravaged remains of Charlie's childhood home collapsed down around them. And the house was storm-ravaged because of Hurricane, the hurricane that tore through landlocked Hurricane, Utah, if you recall. And Charlie told John that Aunt Jen is the one that saved her from Freddy, so that seems like it might track, but also what was Aunt Jen doing there in that basement in that moment? The house had already been condemned and was half collapsed, and she didn't know, like, in the book, Charlie, pieced out from her Aunt Jen and just kind of never talked to her again. Like, they were on good terms, but when she went off on her own, she was just fine not really speaking to her. So why on earth would Aunt Jen just be like, you know what I have a hankering to do? I think I'm just gonna go drive to Hurricane from my abandoned ghost town house, and I'm just gonna peek into my brother or brother-in-law's basement and see what's going on there. Maybe there's a party. And there is a party, but it's a party of peril and everybody's dying. So what is she doing there in that moment? Okay, listen, what I think actually is that it might not have been Aunt Jen at all, but we'll get more into that later. So anyway, Aunt Jen is there at the Shooting Star house, and she's like, oh, hello everyone, welcome to my home in the middle of the dilapidated ghost town. What are you doing here? How are you? And they're chatting, shooting the breeze, trying to unravel the mystery that surrounds them, when they hear a noise from outside and they realize that the Charlie who isn't Charlie has stopped by for a visit. So they run upstairs while Aunt Jen opens the door to speak to the imposter. John and Jessica try to sneak into the first closet that they can find, but alas, it's occupied by the animatronic that Charlie's dad, Henry, built specifically to kill him. It's just a bare-bones endoskeleton with machetes for arms that served one dark purpose and now lives in Aunt Jen's closet in an old house in a ghost town. I will not let that drop. What's she doing there? Probably hiding, I would assume, but still, it's just an interesting choice, I think. Does she always live there? Has this always been their home? Or is she just squatting there for reasons unknown that will shortly be known in just a few short paragraphs. So John and Jessica go into one of the rooms instead, trying to listen as best they can to the conversation below, and it's a conversation that seems to be growing increasingly heated when they start to hear breathing sound coming from inside the room, specifically from a pile of boxes. They look for the source of the noise and they find a mysterious trunk. They open the trunk, and who should they find curled up at the bottom but a young, round-faced teenage Charlie, the Charlie they remember, the real Charlie, deeply, deeply asleep, but alive. And it's around this point that they start to hear some screaming, and then they hear a suspicious lack of screaming, and so John and Jessica try to hide in the closet, but Jessica, being quick on her feet, first loudly runs to the window, flings the pane open, then quietly scuttles into the closet with John, and I think perhaps the trunk, I think they might have dragged that in there with them, and they shut the door, leaving it open just a crack so that they can see Charlie, the fake imposter Charlie, run into the room, looking for whoever she heard upstairs, see the open window, and then vault through it. Like she just jumps right out of a second-story window and hits the ground running. I really do truly believe it was a second-story window, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was just vaulting out of a window for fun, and it wasn't as big of a feat as it seemed to be. But in any case, John and Jessica scoop the real Charlie out of the trunk, still asleep, and head downstairs, where they find Aunt Jen's body. So they run away, taking Charlie back to John's sad little apartment and lay her on the sad little bed because she can't, sadly, seem to wake up. Meanwhile, we get a brief cutaway to Charlie's POV, the not Charlie, as she gleefully and methodically wipes Aunt Jen's blood off of her hands, and in her inner monologue, we learn that she's just constantly in pain. Figuring that Charlie will be safe in the apartment and that there's a mystery to solve, John takes Jessica back to Chief Burke's house. He wants to grab Ella, that little doll Chief Burke said Charlie wasn't interested in claiming, that doll that used to roll out of the smallest closet in Charlie's room and whisk a tea tray around on a circular track. But he doesn't just find Ella at the Chief's house. He also finds a sound illusion disc. Now, a couple of things I just said may have raised some alarms. First, the smallest closet. I'm saying closet a lot, aren't I? Talking about a lot of closets in this, the fourth closet. So, remember way back in the Silver Eyes when we first get the layout of Charlie's bedroom? It's made clear that there are 4 closets that ascend in size. Ella, the doll with the tea tray, was kept in the smallest closet. The 4th and largest closet, Charlie remembers being told to never open, but when she finally does so, years later after her father's passed and she's returned to Hurricane in the first book, she finds that 4th closet is empty. So the 4th closet is clearly important. But whatever was in there, it has gotten out. Second, the sound illusion disc. I break this down in much greater detail in my previous video, but just so we all have a refresher. Sound illusion discs work by using high or low-pitched frequencies to overwhelm and distract your brain. Because they are so high or low-pitched, you don't really realize that you're hearing them, but your brain is taking in and processing this noise to the point of distraction. So it starts filling in the gaps of what it thinks you should be seeing, much in the same way that your brain would fill in the word stop when you see a red octagon out of the corner of your eye while driving. So, let's just say you've seen a lot of Fazbear marketing showing you exactly what Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy should look like. There are a bunch of posters on the walls to remind you just in case you forgot while you're there, and then let's just say that there's some mysterious high or low frequencies hidden into the sweet, sweet tunes of Talking in Your Sleep by the Romantics. And something vaguely bear-shaped was put in front of you, then your mind would fill in the blanks of what Freddy should look like, while the company doesn't have to worry as much about detailed maintenance and upkeep for the animatronics. They could even just put a smooth, weirdly fleshy, vaguely bear or rabbit or fox or chicken-shaped animatronic in front of you, and your mind would do the rest. We all refreshed on sound illusion discs? Okay, good. So John grabs Ella, turns the sound illusion disc on, and with it active, Ella looks like a human toddler. Not just any human toddler, though. Charlie as a human toddler. The puzzle pieces are connecting. The clues are falling into place. Jessica and John go to the library to put the microfilm from Chief Burke in a microfiche, and I love a microfiche moment. I love it. I love it in a movie. Give me a microfiche all the time. There is a piece of hair, and it keeps tickling my nose. I'm so sorry. And upon further inspection, it's clear that there's something wrong with fake Charlie's face. It's glitched and staticky, like a TV with bad reception, and from certain angles, it's not human at all. Completely robotic with a seam down the middle. 1 + 1 = 2, and if one little animatronic doll can turn into a human toddler, who's to say an animatronic lady can't masquerade as their BFF Charlie? So John and Jessica realize that whatever's going on has got to have something to do with sound illusion discs and Chief Burke's hospital bed, they have to have a maximum range, suddenly makes sense. Sound illusion discs must only have a certain range in which they can cast the illusion, and they aren't as effective on camera. And here I must give a nod to Vanny from Security Breach, who glitches on every camera that we see her on, parallels. So that night, when John was outside Chief Burke's house walking to his car and he saw that weird animatronic clown girl walking down the road, that must have been fake Charlie's real face, because, and say it with me,
She doesn't have the range.
so upon having this startling revelation, Jessica's like, quick thought, Charlie, our Charlie, is asleep right now and virtually defenseless, and I'm pretty sure that imposter Charlie is on a seek and destroy mission to find her, so maybe we should just, and then they skedaddle right on out of the library and back to the apartment. And they get there just in time too, because right when they get back to John's house, wicked evil not Charlie shows up at John's apartment and he's like, oh, hi best friends, it's me, Charlie, what's going on? Can I come inside and hang out? And John's like, no, my apartment's super messy. And Charlie's like, silly boy, it can't be as bad as my dorm room. You remember how bad that was when in the Twisted Ones, remember the book that we're all in? Let me inside your house. Jessica distracts Charlie long enough for John to get inside, lock the door under the pretense of cleaning, and grab the still sleeping Charlie from the bed and hide her behind the couch. Then he lets Charlie and Jessica in like everything's normal, like everything's fine, but the tension is so thick. It's clear that fake Charlie knows real Charlie is somewhere in this apartment, and she's walking around, poking into corners, investigating something, she won't say what, but everybody's still trying to act like nobody knows any of this and that everybody's normal and completely chill, so it's just awkward. Honestly, it's just a weird, bad, not good situation. To throw wicked evil not Charlie off the scent when she gets too close to the couch, John offers everyone a soda and they all sit on the couch for a little while, and then Jessica's like, well, I think I better be going. Charlie, you coming? And Charlie agrees to leave. John even goes so far as to offer to drive her wherever she might need to go, but she declines. Instead asking John if he wants to go to the Italian secret Thai fusion restaurant again, and John is like, sure, yes, whatever gets you out of my house and away from my real girlfriend. Yeah, let's get dinner again. He closes the door, he turns to check on real Charlie, and he finds her awake. They speak for just a moment, he adjusts the couch to give her more room and gets her a pillow before she drifts off back to sleep. They get Carlton and Marla to come meet them. And you remember Marla, the older sister of Jason from the first book. There's a lot of characters in this friend group. Charlie is the main character, John's the love interest, Jessica is the female best friend / college roommate, and Carlton, who's the son of the chief of police, and Ghost Michael's best friend, plays an important role in at least book 1 and book 3. And these 4 cover most of the action. We follow Charlie throughout all 3 books, with John and Jessica as the secondary and tertiary characters respectively. In book 1, the friend group also had Marla, her little brother Jason, and Lamar, and those 3 aren't really given much to do throughout the story. Let me look this up to be sure. Lamar, Five Nights at Freddy's. Okay, so I'm looking it up on the Five Nights at Freddy's wiki, and I was right. Lamar does not come back into this story after book 1. He does not come back for the sequel, and he does not come back for the 3rd book in the trilogy, but he is mentioned, and let me quote what it says. Lamar is mentioned by Marla when Carlton asks Marla if Lamar was still around. She quoted that Lamar said, "I'm never, ever, ever setting foot in that town again, not ever, never for as long as I live, and you shouldn't either," but he said that they were all welcome to visit him in New Jersey. So Lamar's around, but Lamar is sensible, and he's like, I'm not hanging around Hurricane, Utah, where all the robots are alive and want to eat my soul. So, Lamar, he got out of town. Jason, I think, is also just first book because they needed a little baby that they had to rescue. Marla's gone for the majority of book 2, but she does come in at the end to mourn Charlie's passing when they call her to let her know what's going on, just for Charlie to show back up. And she is back in this book, and she's usually bouncing around with Carlton when she's in the story. But anyway, she's here now, and we've got most of the core group back together, sans Lamar and Jason. So, Carlton and Marla meet at John's apartment. Everybody debriefs, everybody's encouraged that the real Charlie can wake up, even if she's not quite awake yet, and everybody starts to plan. They figure their best bet is to try and get information out of fake Charlie. John will go to dinner with her while Carlton and Jessica sneak in and watch from a distance. The dinner doesn't go well, with fake Charlie asking John why he went to Silver Reef. How does she know that? She shouldn't have known that. And John doubling down on his favorite topic, which is, you're not the real Charlie. So both of them, not getting what they want from each other, decide to end the date. Charlie stands up, she gives John a little kiss on his cheek, and then she leaves. Carlton and Jessica join John from where they were hiding behind their menus at a different table, and Carlton's like,
That's hot. There's a hot girl right there.
This does not fly with Jessica, who smacks Carlton, and then, because nobody ever warned her not to be a hero, apparently, she jumps in the trunk of fake Charlie's car. For all her bravery and heroism, fake Charlie finds Jessica pretty much right away, pulls her out of the trunk and through the back door of Circus Baby's Pizza World, bonk on the head, knocked unconscious, Jessica wakes up tied to a chair. Fake Charlie takes advantage of her captive audience by rattling off half of her origin story in the form of a villainous monologue. And it's a lot of half-said things, strange illusions, weird little details, but I'm not going to give you a full breakdown quite yet. It's pretty intricate, but what fake Charlie tells Jessica is still only half the truth, and I think I want to break it down all in one go once the second twist is revealed. Short version, she's actually Circus Baby of Circus Baby's Pizza World fame, but she does not quite match the chubby baby version of the signage. She has the same build as Charlie with pretty features and elegant movement, and she's paired up with Afton to commit crime. Now you may be asking, if you're familiar with the FNAF lore basics, hey, Summer, I thought Circus Baby was a big animatronic, like Freddy Fazbear sized. Like I thought she was the size of an animatronic bear, but with the proportions of a chubby toddler, because she is the Circus Baby. I thought she was large enough to scoop a child into her stomach and carry that child around. And then you clarify, I don't mean the way a woman typically carries a child and then that child is born a baby. No, I mean like an 8-year-old kid. And I'd say, oh, I know what you mean. And then you'd say, well, then how did everybody mistake her for Charlie? And then I'd answer you by explaining that she can shapeshift and make use of sound illusion discs. In her regular form, she has the size and proportions of a human woman and not an animatronic toddler. But then she can activate a mechanism that extends a whole bunch of small, skinny rods topped with little balls out all over her body to extend her size and change her general shape and outline to what the traditional Circus Baby marketing shows. Then the sound illusion discs take over the rest, making her into a jolly, happy, shiny clown baby that we all know and fear. And so it just basically, if her silhouette looks like a normal human woman, she pushes a button, all of a sudden her silhouette looks like an animatronic toddler. Sound illusion discs are like, I know what to plaster over that shape, and they put Circus Baby. Throughout the book, there's also been little snippets here and there about mysterious goings-on going on between an unidentified woman and an old man. A trip to the junkyard here, a snippet of strange conversations there, nothing that could really be pieced together, but enough to plant the seeds of a mystery to be revealed. Well, call me a meddling kid and admire my talking Great Dane, because I'm about to unmask a monster. The woman is fake Charlie, hereafter called Baby for ease and clarity, though she is called Elizabeth once in this scene. And the old man is William Afton. Oh my gosh, who would have ever guessed? Oh, not me, I didn't know. Oh, who could have known? Oh, no, not William Afton. No, how did he get here? Yes, good old William Afton and this fancy new animatronic have been planning and plotting from the shadows throughout the whole book. And for one terrifying moment, he's there in front of Jessica, doing a scary little song and dance, all gross and bloated like he was in the Twisted Ones, until a rattly voice is like, "That's enough," and the illusion cuts out, and what was Afton collapses to the ground, a simple, blank animatronic, and the real Afton rolls out in a wheelchair. He is in bad shape. He's missing an eyeball, a chunk of his throat is gone, and there's a piece of, and the skin has been replaced with a piece of plastic so you can like see inside his neck, and you can see all the pieces of the spring locks that are still like stuck and twisted around his muscles. He's got an evil plan, of course, he's William Afton, and I'm gonna get to that evil plan in just a moment. I do just want to say that it's here that we run into another little issue, one of those spots where I'm like, wait, what's happening here? This doesn't make sense to my understanding of the story. Left me a little bit confused, left me scratching my head. And maybe I wouldn't have been scratching my head as much if I reread the books a second time, because knowing the end of the story might have allowed me to better pick up on the real details that were hidden throughout instead of what I'd been theorizing might be going on. But unfortunately, I didn't do that. And so we stand on a precipice. Two paths diverge before us in a wood, neither completely satisfactory. William Afton's plan is a sort of quest for immortality, a way to cheat death. But, I hear you all asking, and I hear it in my heart because I can't physically hear you, but I asked the same thing. Isn't this man already dead? Dare I even say twice dead? Book 1, we see that he's already covered in Springtrap scars, meaning he got Springtrapped once before the events of the first novel even took place and lived, because as weird as he is in the first book, he is definitely alive. And we know he's alive because Charlie kills him by Springtrapping him again. So write that down, he for sure seems dead by the end of book 1. Book 2, he's dead, but he's still out dancing. Jessica and Charlie find his body in a hidden supply closet at the back of Foxy's tent. We are given a vivid description of his putrid, fetid, bloated flesh and his blank, gray, gelatinous eyeballs. And yet, when they leave the door open and run away, he escapes and then comes prancing out of the shadows in that weird second Freddy's location that had blue walls and a fake waterfall, and he's going, "Hello, it is I, the artist formerly known as William Afton. You can call me Springtrap." But despite this distressing behavior, he has to be dead. His body is described as rotting off his bones. He died in the suit, and the internal logic of the story would lead us to conclude that he would haunt the suit because of it, in the same way that the ghost of the children he killed and stuffed into Bonnie, Freddy, Chica, and Foxy haunt their suits. The only difference is a matter of timing. We are just catching him super early in the Ghost game, so he happens to be haunting his own corpse in addition to the golden Bonnie suit, since his corporeal form is still juicy enough to be a problem. And at the end of the Twisted Ones, when Charlie and Afton face off against each other and Charlie stabs him a whole bunch of times, he does go down in a sort of second death in defeat, a metaphorical death. And we have to consider it a metaphor because what good was the 6-inch pike on the business end of a decorative mushroom going to do to a ghost? We always knew Afton was going to come back because, and say it with me,
I always come back.
But here we are, book 3, and we've fully established that he's super duper dead. Like, he literally cannot be otherwise. So tell me why? When we learn of his nefarious plans, we find him in a fevered quest to achieve immortality. Have you not already achieved it, sir? I like to play a little game called the suspension of disbelief, and I like to play it in scenarios like these where I'm not well versed enough in the subject here being the limits of the human body, to know if something could be scientifically possible. But I also understand that this is fiction, and sometimes you gotta just let it slide. Now, suspension of disbelief doesn't cover plot holes. A story must follow its own internal logic. But if you recall, this is Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's a story about the souls of little children haunting rotten animatronics and a man described as resembling a deflated Santa Claus who won't stay dead. So logic has some wiggle room in this tale. William Afton explains his secret dreams and aspirations to Jessica, and it's these dreams and aspirations, this master plan, that does not quite fit the internal logic of the narrative. Let me break it down for you. William Afton, after committing all his crimes, learned that the spirit follows the body, which is why the missing children haunted the metal animatronics they were hidden in, and it's why he haunted his own animatronic. He also learned that he had complete control over his creations, the Twisted Ones, but he did not have complete control over his victims. He could influence them, of course. Their fear and confusion made them distrustful of adults, but when he was in his golden Bonnie suit, they saw him as one of their own. But he couldn't make them do his bidding the way he could the twisted animatronics. So he's decided to do two very enterprising things. Thing 1, he's fused together all his haunted children and has been using their cocktailed metal bones to forge new animatronics to do his bidding. These are the Funtime animatronics, ladies and gentlemen. Thing 2, he's having Baby perform surgery on him, much in the same way that they did surgery on a grape, but it's not the surgery that you would expect. Now, in your own words, please explain below what kind of surgery you'd expect a man twice dead and once pried from the animatronic suit he'd been entombed in to receive. I'll give you a moment. Oh yes, he has been removed from his suit. He's in a wheelchair and he's no longer in the golden Bonnie suit. So please tell me what kind of surgery you think that kind of man would be getting. I'll give you some time. Did you guess a life-saving surgery? A Frankensteinian special? An operation in which his rotten old organs are being replaced by fresh and healthy ones? Well, you're wrong, and because that's what I would have guessed, I'm also wrong. We're all wrong, and we're all worse for it. Because remember, like I said, William Afton thinks the soul follows the body after death. So instead of getting fresh and shiny new organs placed inside him, he's having Baby surgically remove his grody old organs and then take those surgically removed chunks of himself and shove them into the molten core of his fused together victim so his soul can follow his body, thereby tying him inextricably forever to the souls of the false family he cobbled together through the atrocities he committed against his victims. And how do we know this? Because Baby forces Jessica to help with the surgery. She quite literally says he wants you to watch. The only reason you're alive is to watch. And it's super gross. And it goes on for a really long time, and poor Jessica, our fashion queen, tries to distract herself by thinking about shoes while she holds William Afton's kidney in her hand. And yeah, I get it. Diabolical doesn't even begin to cover it. Leave those poor children alone. But I have some questions. Just a couple. First, he's dead? Second, part A. Did not his soul already follow his body? And since we know it did, second part B, artist formerly known as William Afton, please call me Springtrap, why on earth did you decide to climb out of your soul-bearing mech suit so you're left defenseless and squishy as a wicked evil snail sans shell? And third, why do they say this? Hold on, 159. This is a crispy sounding book. The animatronic girl went back to the table and took up the cotton balls and rubbing alcohol. She started with her fingers again, methodically wiping down each one.
Get on with it. Get on with it.
Afton said.
Get on with it. Get on with it.
Afton said impatiently. The girl did not break her deliberate pace. I touched you. I have to start over, she said.
Nonsense. Just do it. I've survived worse than this.
The risk of infection, she said calmly.
Elizabeth, he snapped. Do as I say.
The animatronic girl stopped moving at once, looking startled, and for a moment almost seemed to tremble. Now, I included that last bit about Elizabeth, just because it's important later. But infection? We're worried about the risk of infection? You're dead already, William. This plan, as gruesome as it is, and as much as it ties into the Candy Cadet game lore, the plan raises a lot of questions that push the bounds of the logic of even this series. Namely, why a man who'd already achieved a sort of immortality and the ability to control robots of his own creation with his mind is so obsessed with doing the same thing a second time? So that's path one, a path where a confirmed corpse is getting surgery like a grape to send his soul where it's already gone, off to haunt some metal. But then we have path two. There was fake blood found at the original Freddy's. Maybe William Afton never died at all. Maybe he faked the whole thing using his sound illusion discs. Maybe, having survived a Springlock incident once before, he was able to do so again. But mangled, wounded, not quite well and clinging to life, he wasn't able to chase after Charlie and the gang himself in the second book, so he sent his animatronics after them. Maybe he even used a blank, featureless animatronic to dance and caper around the weird luminescent cave behind the waterfall to torment and entrance Charlie away from the others so he could nab her. We just saw him use an animatronic to do exactly that to Jessica, and with the surgeries, Baby is very careful to disinfect her metal hands. She doesn't want to risk infection, although at this point, what is there left to infect? And this is just his last dark deed to tie himself to his victims and to that haunted metal so he can avoid judgment on his immortal soul. That's path two. And you know what? Path two makes his goal make sense. A living guy, twice spring-trapped and very aware of what an animatronic suit is capable of after death, would be in a fevered quest for immortality. But that also doesn't make any sense because in his expository scene to Jessica, she says, "Oh, then you faked it. There was fake blood at the scene." And he said, "No, I don't know whose fake blood that was, but I bleed." Okay, crazy cakes, what does that mean? And if he's just a guy, and he's not a paranormal entity sent to drive us all mad with his half-truths and confounding logic from beyond the grave, then how did he mind control the twisted animatronics? The twisted ones weren't made with haunted metal. He just controlled those with his mind. He shows later in the book that he can control all of the toy animatronics. Now, maybe that's because he forges them from the metal of the original animatronics, and they have a tie to him because he's their murderer, but even then, he is just a guy if he's alive. And all of this, his goal in any scenario, is probably just to reestablish his control over his original victims, but neither option fully makes sense, and I am left standing at this crossroads in the woods, forlorn and confused. And like, man, I like a lot about how this all pans out, but it just seems strange to me. If he's alive, his plan makes sense, but his enhanced supernatural abilities do not. If he's dead and somehow still seeking immortality, it's like, dude, I think you're as close as you're gonna get. You're dead, and yet you're somehow still my problem. Now, real quick before we check in with Carlton and Marla and John and Charlie, I gotta touch on the Candy Cadet thing because it's one of those parallels between the book and game lore. Candy Cadet is a little robot from FNAF 6, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator, and he tells stories if you play the game right. I don't know what right means. I never made it past night 3 of game 1, but all of his stories have the same theme. Here are those stories.
Now I will tell you a story about a young woman who was sealed in a small room. In the room was a furnace and 5 keys. She was told that each of the 5 keys would unlock one of the 5 doors outside of her room. Inside each room was a child that she could take with her as she fled the building, but she was only allowed to leave her room with 1 key, not all 5. Desperate to find a way to save all 5 children, the woman melted the 5 keys together in the furnace to create a single key, hoping it would unlock all 5 doors. Of course, it did not work that way. Now her key opened none of the doors. Rather than leaving there with the key to 1 life, she had taken with her the key to 5 deaths.
Story 2.
Now I will tell you the story about a little boy. He had a red snake that he kept in a metal cage, whose hunger could not be satisfied. One day, the boy found 5 baby kittens outside his house. He brought them inside and kept them in a shoebox. He knew that the snake might kill them, but he could not bring himself to get rid of the snake. He knew that if he chose one kitten to feed the snake, it might be satisfied, but he could not choose. So he went to bed, leaving the cage open. The snake went to the shoebox, chose a kitten at random, and ate it. After 5 nights had gone by, the boy was full of regret, and cut the snake open. He pieced the remains together and put the kitten back in the shoebox.
Story 3.
Now I will tell you a story about a kind man who would visit 5 orphans and bring them toys and gladness. The man lived alone and lived in fear that someone might break into the house of one of his 5 children. So he adopted all 5 and brought them together in one place in his own home. He promised never to leave them, and they promised to always come home and never stay out too late. He left one day to buy food, his heart being filled with gladness, but returned to find that the burglar had chosen his home and had killed all 5 of the children. The man could only afford 1 coffin, so he stitched the 5 bodies together to make one and buried the child. That night, there was a knock at the door.
I don't know what happens after the knock at the door, but, as you can see, there is the same major theme in each story. 5 things becoming one thing to disastrous effect. The 5 keys become 1 key, and no one can be saved because of it. The 5 kittens become 1 kitten, but far too late to save any of the kittens from the snake. The 5 murdered orphans all get sewn together to better fit in the coffin. That actually doesn't make any sense at all, because the sewing wouldn't help them fit. You probably just put them all in unzone. I don't know. Let's just chalk that one up to grief, shall we? Let's just say that he was a little mad with grief. This parallels the 5 original animatronics being fused together into one tragic Tangled mask and being used to forge more animatronics that better obey Afton's will. Anyway, that's his master plan, and he's got a handful of newly kidnapped kids because he's William Afton and that's what he does, so let's leave William, Baby, and a freshly traumatized Jessica, who just got tossed in with the kidnapped kids, to go check in with the rest of the gang. I had to change for work. So, checking back in with the gang. Charlie wakes up, it's great. John and Carlton and Marla give her a hug and they try to see if she has any idea what might be going on, and filling her in about the Ella doll that looks like her as a toddler and fake Charlie and the fact that she's been masquerading as her for this whole time, but to no avail. Charlie has no clue what any of this might mean. So, quick refresher on a detail from back in book 2 that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Theodore the Purple Rabbit. Charlie was working on a project that combined robotics and artificial intelligence. 2 animatronic, nearly featureless faces were connected to a device that, when in sleep mode, it was always listening in order to train the AI to speak. And Charlie could then flip a switch to turn them on, at which point they would begin speaking to each other in short, simple phrases in a sort of call and repeat, but they wouldn't respond to any outside input. If, however, Charlie put on a specific earpiece, it would then loop her into their conversation. And when Charlie wore that earpiece, the robot faces could see her, and they would listen and respond to her as well. John asked Charlie if the earpieces, which were typically used to make the animatronic faces see, hear, and generally be aware of whoever was wearing the earpiece, could be made to do the opposite. Charlie says yes. With a little fiddling and a few switched wires, the earpieces could make an animatronic, maybe even any animatronic, blind, deaf, and oblivious to the person wearing the earpiece. So Carlton volunteers to go grab the earpieces from Jessica's apartment. He finds the experiment fine, he grabs the earpieces, finds the wire, switches things around. Right at that moment, Baby, disguised as fake Charlie, shows up at Jessica's place. She tries to question Carlton. I think she even tries to kiss Carlton, but he's wise to her games, and once she's rebuffed, Baby drops the Charlie facade, her face cracks open to reveal a bunch of scary gears, and then she goes in for the kiss anyway. Carlton puts the earpiece on just then, unsure if it will even work, and it does. Baby suddenly can't see him. It's as if he doesn't exist to her. Now, I assume the earpieces work because it has something to do with frequencies, and you may be asking, Summer, if Charlie made these earpieces specifically for this one set of animatronic faces for a specific purpose and a specific experiment, how would it work on other animatronics? I've already talked a little bit about suspension of disbelief, and we've all wrestled with the internal logic of William Afton's plans already. So the thing is, this series sets these earpieces up as a plot point all the way back in book 2, and they're paying off now. So I think that the internal logic makes sense, even if in real life there might be some hiccups. But whatever it is, however it works, it does work. And now they have these magic earpieces that can make them invisible to animatronics. We move on. While Carlton was facing down a rampaging baby, Charlie and John realized they needed to go back to Aunt Jen's to look for answers. So when Carlton returns triumphant, he finds only Marla. But he's a smart cookie. He puts 2 and 2 together, and he tells Marla that they need to get to Circus Baby's Pizza World because that's where Jessica must be and the missing kids. Go team on 3. 3. Go team on 3. 1, 2, 3. Go team. So Carlton and Marla, each with an earpiece, break into Circus Baby's Pizza World, and it's basically an indoor carnival. There are games and rides and a ball pit and a mirror maze. They start sneaking, they start snooping, unseen by the animatronics, but that doesn't help them when they get to the mirror maze and find that Funtime Freddy is in there with them. Now, he can't see either of them because of the earpieces, but he gets pretty close a few times, and finally, when he's too close, he's got them cornered, Carlton uses his flashlight to break one of the mirror panels so he and Marla can get to the exit quicker. But as they're getting out of Freddy's way, trying to clamber through all this broken glass, Carlton loses his earpiece, and Funtime Freddy can see him. All seems lost, Funtime's Freddy charging at him, but Marla gets the earpiece back to Carlton just in time, allowing them to exit the maze and get away from Funtime Freddy. And then they find the room with Jessica and the missing children. One of the children, however, was already dragged away by Mangle, the Funtime version of Foxy. Carlton gives his earpiece to Jessica and tells the girls to take the remaining kids and get outside, and he'll go after the final child. It's a harrowing journey. It's a slow journey. There are these weird little baby-headed things that are coming after them, trying to get the children since they can't see either Marla or Jessica. Mangle keeps popping up out of nowhere. Weird baby-headed robots are getting tossed into the ball pit. At one point, Jessica takes her earpiece out to distract Mangle/Funtime Foxy while Marla and the 3 children escape. Jessica then tangles Mangle up in a playground net, and she gets out as well, so they're all safe. Now, jumping over to John and Charlie, they've gone back to Silver Reef to look for clues in Aunt Jen's house, and they end up finding a letter from Charlie's father to her Aunt Jen that basically says, "You were right. I did all this work for nothing. It's never going to bring her back. I'm going to be with my real daughter, burn down the house, and kill whatever tries to come out of it." This is, understandably, a very strange letter to receive, but John and Charlie don't have much time to ponder it before Baby, disguised as fake Charlie, barges in, makes eye contact with real Charlie, gives John a big smooch, and then starts beating him up. Then, Baby reveals the truth about Charlie. Now let's start all the way back at the beginning, at the original Freddy Fazbear's location, Fredbear's Family Diner. 2 partners, William and Henry, dance around in the costumes of a yellow bear and a yellow bunny. Golden Freddy and Golden Bonnie. These wonderful suits with a unique design. They can be worn as a costume or set to be self-roaming, and it's all in the spring locks, baby. As long as those are pulled back, there's plenty of room inside for a human body. This shouldn't have any issues unless those go off, and then there's no more room anymore for anybody's body to be anywhere. It's very bad. We all know about spring locks. The men were partners, but Henry was a special kind of genius, and this fact filled William with a jealous drive to be just as good, to try and be even better. Henry has 2 children, a pair of twins, his daughter Charlotte and his son Sammy. For reasons never fully explained, because what explanation could there possibly be for this, William Afton, dressed in his Golden Bonnie suit, goes to the storage closet where Henry's children are currently playing, deliberates, and then takes one of them. Now, Charlie, our heroine, our final girl, the main character of this story, thought it had been her brother Sammy that was taken. She had forgotten she even had a brother, until they find Fredbear's, and then the memory of him and his kidnapping come flooding back. But when Charlie confronts Afton about Sammy in that weird glowing cave behind the fake waterfall and that strange alternate blue version of Freddy's, Afton says, "I didn't take Sammy. I took you." Charlie doesn't know what to make of this and has very little time to worry about it before she gets crushed to death inside that oddly fleshy, beat up and broken, twisted version of Freddy Fazbear. And actually, let's pause here for a moment to address the Sammy of it all. What is up with Sammy? Like, Charlie remembers having a brother. Charlie finds pictures of her mom and brother in her childhood home. Big twist, Afton took Charlie, not Sammy. But then where is Sammy? Did the mom just take Sammy and leave? Was baby/fake Charlie telling the truth when she said Sammy was dead on that date with John? Sammy is a massive red herring throughout this series, and his absence is a big driving force behind much of Charlie's actions, especially in book 2. But from the stunning revelation that Afton took Charlie from the closet, Sammy's never really mentioned again to my knowledge. The twist is delivered, but the truth about Sammy or her mom is not. What we do know is the aftermath of Afton's choice. Charlie died. That's right. Charlie, our heroine, our final girl, the main character of this story, died at Afton's hand as a toddler, breaking Henry's heart, destroying his marriage, and pushing him off the edge from genius into madman. All Henry has of his beloved little girl is her favorite stuffed animal, a small thing that can't possibly hold all of the love he's pouring into it. The only place that love can go now that the little girl who held the stuffed animal is gone. He swears he can feel her with him when he holds it. But he's a builder. He can make things. What if he remakes her? What if he can bring her back? He goes into this sort of fugue state, crafting his greatest creation, a beautiful animatronic doll just the size and shape of his little girl. He records himself building, creating memories to put in her head. All his grief and love and anguish get poured into the animatronic. He uses the technology he and William developed, sound illusion discs, putting them all over his house, tricking and warping his mind into seeing what he wants to see, his tiny daughter alive and well. But something's off. Something's missing. When the stuffed animal isn't in the room with him, he can't feel Charlie at all, even with his skillfully built replica and the sound illusion discs distorting his perception. He realizes that the stuffed animal is the key. The doll isn't haunted. It's not Charlie's soul that's clinging to this mortal coil. It's more that his love for Charlie, his pain at her loss, every sweet memory he has of her, are stuffed inside this small toy, so strong and real that it's almost as if her soul was there. So Henry takes that stuffed animal and he puts it inside the little animatronic doll, and she's back. He has his daughter again. The little toddler Charlie, she's sad a lot, though, built from grief as she is, but the success of this has given Henry a new idea. It's not enough to just bring Charlie back as she was. He has to bring her back as everything she could be, not just as a toddler, but a little girl, a teenager, a woman, the life she should have had, built in 4 stages and stored in 4 closets. He builds the elementary age Charlie in this state. Denial, if we're looking at the 5 stages of grief. It's not an exact parallel. He's only planning on building 4 Charlies, but what do you do? It seems like a perfect plan, and it works well. Charlie, the elementary age Charlie, is well adjusted, playful, gets along well with other children. Now that the toddler version has been retired and the stuffed animal that was inside of her now resides inside the new elementary age Charlie, What was once the toddler is now nothing more than a toy for his daughter. Her name is Ella, she holds a little tea tray, and she trundles out of the smallest closet in Charlie's room on a track. It's around this point, though, that the denial starts to lift. Grief never really goes away, but with time the wound gets smaller. It starts to heal. You start to see clearly again. That's just human nature. He's well on his way through working on teenage Charlie at this point, but doubt starts creeping in. What he's doing is strange, isn't it? It's odd. It's not right. He decides to call Jen, show her what he's doing, and she, understandably, is like, oh, absolutely not. This makes him angry, and he's not ready to give up on his plan yet, so he finishes teenage Charlie, the Charlie we know, our Charlie, a girl who's always felt strange and odd and not quite right. By the time he gets to the fourth Charlie, the adult version of Charlie, the Charlie that embodies all his abandoned hopes of what his daughter's life might have been, Henry is filled with rage. That is all that's left inside of him. He tried bargaining, because what could rebuilding your child from scrap metal be other than a bargain for more time? He tried denying the truth. He poured all of his grief and sorrow into this project only to be left with nothing but dross. It didn't matter how many pretty lies he spun. His daughter was dead. So he abandoned the fourth Charlie, and he turned his sights to a different animatronic, an animatronic with a single purpose: to use its machete arms to kill its maker. Aunt Jen takes elementary-age Charlie with her when Henry takes himself off the board, and despite his request that she burn the house down, it stays standing. We also have to assume that at some point she comes and does the transfer herself, because Charlie is a teenager or young adult in this series. But how did Jen know how to do that? I don't know. Henry was either very thorough in his explanation of what he was doing, or he wrote very detailed instructions on like the backside of the letter, just in case you don't burn the house down and kill whatever comes outside of it. Here's how to transfer my sweet elementary school age daughter's fake soul into a new robot. So all that's left in the house is the half-finished adult Charlie, the thing that Charlie remembers hanging in the corner of her father's workshop, the thing with flashing silver eyes and an aura of menace. And she is menacing. Her metal bones were forged in a father's rage. That hopeless, empty, helpless anger against an injustice that could not be undone is her marrow. She is a body without spirit, a being without mind, conscious but not, aware only that she is livid and in constant, twitchy pain. It's night now. That is, until Afton gets his hands on her. It's not exactly explained how, but in Baby's monologue to Jessica, we learn that Afton somehow acquired this fourth version of Charlie, and he finished what Henry started. He made her beautiful. He made her into his greatest creation. He made her into the perfect daughter. But the problem is, Afton already had a daughter, a little girl named Elizabeth, who'd been watching her dad toil and struggle over this robot girl and never had any time left over for her. Jealous, wanting to be this doll, wanting to be near this doll, Elizabeth finally sneaks over to where Baby is, despite her father's warning to never approach. There's this great bit where Baby's describing what this moment was like for her, where she can see the face of little Elizabeth as she looks down at her, not a feeling or a thought at all in her non-existent mind beyond that constant thrum of anger and pain. But she also remembers looking up at herself, seeing the pretty orange pigtails, the peppy red skirt, so happy to finally be close to this thing that her dad loved so much. Too close to this thing. Close enough for Circus Baby to do exactly what Afton had built her to do. A mechanical claw bursts out of Baby's stomach, grabs Elizabeth, and stuffs the little girl inside of herself, killing her. Suddenly, Baby wasn't just anger. She was anger and Elizabeth all twisted up together. Now, I'm not actually sure how this next part happens. Maybe it was because William had to lay low after kidnapping a bunch of kids. Maybe in his grief at losing his daughter, he locked Baby away. But somehow, Baby/adult Charlie/Elizabeth Afton gets stuffed into a closet. But this isn't the fourth closet, the one that would have held her if everything had gone according to Henry's plan. No, this is a closet in Henry's basement, a door hidden behind sound illusion discs. The door that Charlie, in the Twisted Ones, couldn't stop dreaming about or drawing. The hidden door she'd found as her childhood home collapsed around her. The door she'd lingered by too long trying to figure out what was behind it. The door that provided the distraction that gave that broken, twisted, weirdly fleshy Freddy Fazbear enough time to find Charlie and kill her. John thought he saw Aunt Jen as he was pulled away, but I don't think it was her. I think it was Circus Baby / Adult Charlie / Elizabeth Afton, freshly freed from the closet, collapsed. And what John saw was Baby checking to see if Charlie was alive. So circling back to the present moment, Charlie is flabbergasted by this revelation, and Baby is like, I tried for so long to figure out what's special about you, why I can't be as good as you, why Afton's so obsessed with you, why I have to be angry and hurting all this time when you get to walk around making friends and living your best life. You are just as fake as me, you're just as false as I am, and the only difference is that little stuffed animal that I just pulled out of your back. And I'm sorry, but I have to kill you now. If Afton gets you, he won't need me anymore, and I want to be needed, so you have to die. Charlie, thinking as quickly as she can, backs away from Baby and backs toward the closet that holds her dad's machete knife arm robot. It seems the only way out is through. Through her chest, that is, because she activates the animatronic, skewering herself, the stuffed animal, and Baby all in one go. In a final moment of what I have to assume is kindness, Charlie pushes the stuffed animal towards Baby's chest. And that's the end of our Charlie. So, to recap, Marla, Jessica, and the missing kids are safe. John is alive, Charlie and Baby are dead. But where is Carlton? Well, Carlton has been on an odyssey of his own, perpetually chased by Funtime Freddy and unable to find that lost little boy. At one point, he finds a carnival ride in one of the rooms, and because he's smart and clever, and that's a very big toy over there, he runs over to the control panel, lures Funtime Freddy into place, and then turns the ride on, crushing Funtime Freddy. He's been through a lot at this point, and he still can't find the missing kid. He can't save the kid, just like he couldn't save his best friend Michael, and he has a nice little cry because he's earned it. But then, like a song in the wind, he hears a child cry out. And it's a really, really bad song, of course, a song you never want to hear, but in this moment, it means that little boy is still alive, that he can be saved, and that Carlton still has hope. So he goes, Mitzi, you gotta calm down. You can't be leaping. I have a delicate setup here. So he goes off in the direction of the sound, and he finds himself in William Afton's lair. The wicked evil slugman sits kidneyless in his wheelchair, and the heap of melted, twisted living metal rests near the furnace. And there, as well, in the room, is the little boy, alive but frightened. There's a fracas, of course, Carlton fighting William to save the child, but somehow William gets the upper hand, and he takes this big syringe full of hot, haunted metal, stabs Carlton with it, and injects the metal straight into his heart. Curtains for Carlton, or so it would seem, but he finds himself in a strange in-between place. He can still see Afton and the little boy, watching as Afton makes preparations to harm the child, but he can also see loose-leaf sheets of paper fluttering down around him, covered with crayon and marker, children's drawings torn in pieces, and around him are dozens of children. A little girl with blonde hair runs by, followed by another little girl with identical blonde hair. Twins? He notices more pairs of identical children, twins becoming triplets, then quadruplets, then quintuplets, until he finally realizes that he isn't surrounded by dozens of children or gaggles of twins. He's surrounded by copies and copies and copies of the same 5 children, the 5 missing children, including his best friend Michael. He grabs a piece or two of the fluttering paper himself. They seem to all be different pieces of the same drawing, or at least similar drawings. He starts doing what the kids are doing, grabbing at the scraps, but he starts laying them out in front of himself, piecing together the puzzle, and as he does so, he starts to notice that there are less of the copied children running around. Each time he correctly combines a drawing, 2 of the copies will merge, becoming more solid until all that's left are the 5 children and 1 drawing that's most important. A drawing of all 5 children and a yellow rabbit. The soul follows the body. William Afton's fevered quest for immortality is, at its core, an experiment. He wants to see if he can repeat what he did before, if his soul would bond to the metal the way the souls of his victims did. He wasn't intending to have Carlton share in that experiment, but he wasn't one to refuse a perfectly good opportunity when it presented itself. Carlton's body has a heart full of molten, haunted metal at its core now, so his soul follows that metal right to the missing children. But what Afton's also done in fusing these 5 animatronics into one, in pulling from the core of those fused animatronics to forge new creatures, is he's ripped their souls apart. Of course the Funtime animatronics are easier for Afton to control. It's hard to have thoughts of your own when you're scattered into pieces. But Carlton has pieced them together, bit by bit, and now they're whole again. Carlton tries to explain that the rabbit isn't their friend, that the rabbit is the one who hurt them, but they don't seem to understand. Carlton points at the rabbit in the drawing and asks the children about it. They say that Bonnie is their friend. Bonnie helped them with their dog. Bonnie has protected them and kept them safe. Someone hurt them, but Bonnie was always there for them. Carlton tries to explain that Bonnie isn't their friend, that the rabbit is the one who hurt them, but they don't seem to understand. Now, out in the real world, where his body is rapidly dying from, the hot metal that's pumping through his heart, the Funtime animatronics, Mangle, Funtime Freddy, the weird baby things, far worse for wear, by the way, after their interactions with Carlton, Marla, and Jessica, have crawled down to Afton for repairs. All Afton can see, from his point of view, is a dying college student, not the results he was really looking for, so he fills a new syringe up and goes for the little boy. He orders the Funtimes to grab the child, but they don't react. He then orders the melted, twisted lump of metal. It's still got moving limbs and a heart because it's possessed by those 5 sweet baby children, even if it's a bit lumpy and riddled with an old man's organs, and part of it moves to respond. The children have always done what the rabbit told them because he's their friend. He's safe. But inside that weird in-between place, in that place where all the souls are, Carlton stops Susie, one of the missing children, from obeying Afton. He tries to explain to them again, finally grabbing a red crayon and adding blood to the illustration of Golden Bonnie. And something clicks. The children remember. They see Afton for what he is, and they see him heading straight for the boy. The huge, twisted, fused thing rises off the table, bumping into the furnace that had been keeping the metal soft and pliable and igniting into flame. What's left of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, Chica, and Golden Freddy. What's left of Gabriel, Fritz, Cassidy, Susie, and Michael grab Afton and pull him into the flames, killing him. Finally. For either the first or third time. As the metal burns down to ash, or whatever metal turns into when it's been heated in a fire and is no longer able to hold souls. I'm not a blacksmith, I don't know what that's called. The missing children, souls whole and finally free, start to walk off towards the light, until all that's left is Carlton, with a terrible burning in his chest, and his best friend Michael sitting next to him. I'm actually just going to read this next part. Carlton. Carlton opened his eyes. Michael was sitting patiently beside him, apparently waiting for him to wake up. Is he okay now? Michael gave Carlton an anxious smile. Carlton looked up to see 4 small figures disappearing into a flood of light. Only Michael remained under the table. Is he okay? Michael repeated, waiting for confirmation. Yeah, Carlton whispered. He's okay. Go be with your friends. He smiled, but Michael didn't get up. He was looking at Carlton's chest, where someone had placed a drawing over his wound. This is part of you, Carlton said, grasping at the picture. You'll die without it, Michael whispered. I can't keep this. Carlton shook his head as Michael pushed it back. You can give it to me next time you see me. Michael smiled, and the drawing began to fade, hovering where Michael had placed it for a last moment before the ghostly image vanished, seeming to sink into Carlton's chest. Thank you. Carlton heard the echo of Michael's voice, but Michael was gone, and there was nothing but the light. Carlton wakes in the hospital, still alive but horribly wounded, and finally reunited with his friends. Jessica hands him something that they said they found near him. A drawing. 5 happy children, running on a hill under the sun free. And a lot, it makes me want to cry. I actually love that ending. I will take the whole weird, convoluted uncertainty on if William Afton is dead or alive for this. From the first book, one of the biggest tragedies tied to the missing children was that on top of everything else that happened to them, being kidnapped, murdered, their souls not at rest, was the fact that they were trapped in those suits thinking the man who killed them was their friend, that he'd fashioned himself into a father of sorts for their wayward souls, and even inches from the grave, or freshly crawled from the grave, he would stop at nothing, not even pulling his own kidney out of his body to make sure they couldn't get away even in death. And even at the end of this book, when he's talking about Carlton is like, how could you do this to them? He's talking about pulling their metal and using it to make the other animatronics. What does he say? Carlton. He stepped back with a shout of surprise. The voice was so clear in his head that he recognized it instantly. Michael? That single word was enough. Carlton turned to the table with a new, terrible clarity. He knew exactly what he was looking at. The endoskeletons of the original Freddy's animatronics, welded and melted together, immobile and featureless, and still inhabited by the spirits of the children who had been murdered inside of them so many years ago. Still filled with life and motion and thought, all trapped, all in terrible pain, Carlton forced himself to look at William Afton in the eye. How could you do this to them? He asked, nearly trembling with rage. They do everything willingly, William said plainly. The process only works if they freely release a portion of themselves. The flames rose without warning, and the heat radiated in painful waves from the gaping furnace. Carlton shielded his eyes, and the creature on the table convulsed. William smiled. Scared of fire. But they still trust me. They don't see me as I am now. They only remember me as I was, you see. The fact that even their soul being ripped apart was done willingly because they trusted Afton, because they couldn't understand what he was. Oh my gosh. So to see those sweet babies finally see the truth, finally get free, their souls at rest, and to especially see Carlton, who had always regretted the loss of Michael so deeply, be the one to save Michael, and to have Michael save him in return. I cried when I read it. I cried when I wrote this. I want to cry a little bit now. Also, the drawing thing was in the movie. We remember Summer put the clip. And I loved seeing it because I love this scene in the book. But I heard that that was a point of confusion for a lot of people. It worked so well in the book because the deceit the children were under was made clear in book 1. And it's a deceit they've been operating under this entire time. And to finally see that deceit be lifted and have them finally freed in this third book makes that so effective. The movie didn't have time to build that, nor did it quite as clearly explain the link between the children's drawings and the missing children's confusion. But now you can like that scene too, since I've explained it to you and cried a little on camera. We crew together. We crowed. Anyway, like I said, Carlton wakes up in the hospital. Everyone's okay. No one knows where Charlie is, and Chief Burke says he's not going to go looking for her. John slips out of the hospital room and goes to the graveyard, where he stands in front of the tombstone for Henry and the tombstone of his daughter Charlie, finally laid to rest. And waiting for him, beneath a tree, is a woman with dark hair, who I really, really hope is the adult version of Charlie, but with the soul stuffed animal tucked away inside her. That way she's like our Charlie, but an adult, because otherwise their romance is gonna get real weird if John keeps getting older and Charlie stays a teen. So I like to believe that that's what that final push was, is that Charlie was finally, that's why it was an act of kindness in my mind. Charlie ending this because she knew she had to, put the doll towards that bitter, hurting, painfully angry adult version of herself, who never knew the love that Henry had given all the other versions of her. And now, with that actual piece of her father's love inside her, she can maybe be better than she was before. How does that work out with all the anger and rage in her bones and the fact that Elizabeth Afton's already kind of, twisting around in there? That's for somebody else to answer, not me. But anyway, that is the Silver Eyes trilogy, and this has been the fourth closet. Despite some of its more confusing moments, I actually really enjoyed this series as a whole. It's fun, it's engaging, it has some really good gut punch moments with what you don't really expect in a Five Nights at Freddy's book, but it delivers. And while the first book was my favorite, it's got great atmosphere and really just feels like a 90s teen slasher. Fantastic vibes. The fourth closet brought the trilogy to a really satisfying conclusion with some fun, kind of bonkers reveals for things hinted at throughout the trilogy as a whole. If you haven't read them, I do actually recommend them. Like, you know what you're getting into. You're reading a Five Nights at Freddy's trilogy, but they are still so much fun, and I think they're definitely worthwhile if you're looking for something a little spooky and something fun to read. Anyway, I'm done now. Goodbye.